One must first understand its major causes. The Great Depression was brought on by the increasing income gap, popularity of buying on credit, margin buying of stocks, staggering number of business and bank failures, agricultural problems, and the changed tariff policy of the late 1920s and early mid 1930s. So let's get going to the most depressing period in American history. Diksha, are we almost here?
Oh, yeah. Hold on tight.
For the first day of our trip, we're going to witness the stock market crash of 1929. Known as the spark of the Great Depression, the crash occurred because of an overproduction of goods, increase in unemployment rates, increase in debt, and loss of money in banks due to overinvestments. The stock market crash was what propelled the nation deeper into an economic decline because once the market collapsed, many people started losing their jobs, eventually becoming poor and homeless and no longer being able to provide for themselves or for their families. On November 23rd, the stock market hit rock bottom and began trading sideways. Now, we're going to visit a trading post so that we can see the sideways market in action. The term sideways market refers to when the price of certain investments all remain within a set range of values for a period of time. In order to make money in this kind of situation, it is most effective to trade sideways, which people did by making multiple investments into various companies. To avoid fluctuations once the market broke out, people made sure not to make too small or too big investments. Still, this only sustained them for so long. The start of the sideways market indicated the commencement of the economic decline. In an effort to control the plummeting economy, President Hoover approved the Hawley-Smoot tariff, which enacted a high tariff on imported goods. This was supposed to protect and help the farmers, but it only plunged America deeper into depression because the trade gap between foreigners increased. So, we didn't get anything out of this tariff, except for bad economic warfare. Something positive, however, was the establishment of the Department of Veterans Affairs. This department was established to assist veterans by providing them with money to purchase homes, farms, and small businesses. It was more effective than the typical government loans because it gave veterans little to no down payment at a market interest rate. The department also catered to the disabled and had its first consolidation with other programs to form the Veterans Bureau. The success of this department was so high that President Hoover signed an executive order to promote it to become an official federal administration. While yesterday ended on a positive note, today, grab a hat and a few hundred bottles of sunscreen because we're going to the Arkansas drought. From Mississippi all the way up to the Mid-Atlantic region, 23 states were affected by this drought. However, the state which was most affected was Arkansas. In Arkansas, temperature was typically in the 90s, but some days it went as high as 113 degrees. By August 2nd, its capital, Little Rock, had experienced 71 consecutive rainless days. The weather didn't just affect people, though. It also affected their crops. Cotton, previously the leading crop, could no longer grow in such hot conditions, so the value of it reached $132,911,000. It eventually started to cost more to plant crops than to actually return the harvest, and this showed just how deep into the depression some states already were. Our next stop is the Chicago Soup Kitchen. Surprisingly, the first soup kitchen was established by Al Capone. He wanted to try and clear his bad name, so he made sure it could serve people 3 meals a day. Soup kitchens were extremely helpful during this time period as many people were impoverished or unemployed and had no other source of food. They were usually staffed by volunteers from church groups or community groups, and the inside pretty much looked like our cafeteria. Soup kitchens were one of the few charity centers where government aid wasn't absolutely necessary, which is why they never died down. In the early 1930s, the U.S. as a whole was in a really bad place economically. There was a lack of food across all of the states. While many people could go to soup kitchens and get a little bit of food, some were never satisfied. In February 1931, food riots began to break out in different parts of the U.S. In Minneapolis, especially, hundreds of men and women smashed the windows of a grocery market and ran off with fruit, ham, canned goods, and bacon. Even though they were literally threatened by the store owner with a gun, these people were so desperate for food that they attacked him and broke his arm. The riot was finally brought under control, and 7 people were arrested, but this was with the help of 100 policemen. For the final activity of the day, we're going to witness the Japanese attack on Manchuria. The Great Depression has clearly been the cause of a lot of conflict in the U.S., but it also added stress to foreign affairs. In September 1931, Japan attacked Manchuria, completely disregarding the open-door policy in China. They had no reason for doing this, except for the fact that they wanted to have an empire as large as the Western Empire. Even though the League of Nations had the power to end Japan's advances, they chickened out and didn't do anything. The League refusing to take action to fix this foreign conflict underscored how powerless the band of countries were in the face of one another, clearly due to the Great Depression.
Today, you will visit multiple different places and get to learn so much. Let's start off by stopping by at a bank in New York. Come and see the intensity and vast effect of the major bank failures during the Great Depression. One bank that collapsed during this time was New York's Bank of the United States. This was one of the biggest collapses during this time because this bank was holding more than $200 million in deposit. You will witness the struggles people endured in order to keep their money safe. There were about more than 9,000 bank failures, and these bank failures caused people to participate in bank runs. During these bank runs, people withdrew their money, and they didn't realize that this just caused banks to close faster. The fact that many people even trampled on one another in order to save their money shows us just how desperate the situation was at this time. Our next stop is Washington, D.C. Here we will witness the assemblance of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which was created by Herbert Hoover. As you know from our previous destination, banks were closing all over the United States. Herbert Hoover's idea of rugged individualism, the idea that people should help themselves, was enforced through this corporation. This corporation was made to help provide assistance to insurance companies, banks, agricultural organizations, railroads, and local governments. This corporation did not help people directly, but instead helped banks and companies. Next stop, Iowa Farm. Come with us to the Iowa farming strike. It was natural that farmers must have had a hard time during the Depression because of their crops not selling in the market. Believe it or not, farming was actually a necessity for farmers so that they could provide for their families. Farmers were even becoming bankrupt since they weren't getting paid enough for what they were producing. The farming situation was so bad in Iowa that many farmers protested because of the low prices that they were being paid for the products that they were selling. They started blockades on roads, and they prevented any trucks that carried their products from going into the cities. Unfortunately, the farmers still did not get the pay that they deserved. Our last stop for today is the Bonus Army Rally. This is where veterans, headed by the Bonus Expeditionary Force, wanted immediate payment of their bonus payment from all of their service during World War I. You will be taken to see the conflicts revolving around the payments for veterans. To prove their point even further, veterans set up unsanitary camps, also known as Hoovervilles, to show their poverty and to prove how desperately they needed the bonus. Hoover's response to this march made things a lot worse than what they could have been. He sent General Douglas MacArthur to stop the rally. MacArthur had the army use bayonets and tear gas to try and remove the veterans from the camps. Due to this, an 11-month baby ended up dying. Hoover's reputation was tarnished as a result of the death of the baby.
We'll start off day 4 by listening to FDR's inaugural address. The low standards of living from 1929 to 1931 caused many Americans to feel that they were ready for a new president. During the election of 1932, Republican President Herbert Hoover was defeated in a landslide by Democrat Franklin D. Roosevelt, the governor of New York. During FDR's inaugural address, you will be able to listen to FDR listing the problems facing the country. This will also allow you to truly understand the myriad of and the intensity of issues the country faced at the time. During the next part of the tour, we will head towards Detroit to hear the radio priest. Remember that the people during this time were in need. Many preachers played on the desires and emotions of the American public. The first preacher we'll be listening to is Father Charles Coughlin. He was one of the most popular opponents of FDR's policies. He often claimed that FDR's monetary policies were unconstitutional and proposed new monetary reforms as the solution. Now let's change the channel to hear about the Townsend Plan. This was an incredibly popular movement which was brought on by social distress. Dr. Francis E. Townsend played on the elderly Americans' distrust of the monetary system when he announced his plan. His plan was one in which senior citizens would be given a pension of $200 a month under the condition that they would spend all of it. This would increase deficit spending, a key cornerstone of the Keynesian economy theory. Finally, let's travel to the west to witness the longshoremen's strike. We have arrived at the waterfront. Notice that there aren't many workers on the ship. Well, during the spring and summer of 1934, about 12,000 waterfront workers in the west went on strike for 83 days. By July, the labor unrest reached the city of San Francisco in a revolt against government and claimed 8 lives. Welcome to the 5th day of our tour. We're still in the West and just in time for California state elections. Upton Sinclair ran and won the primary with his epic End Poverty in California platform. This appealed to the unemployed residents of the state because it promoted state-sponsored jobs so California could serve its own needs. Sinclair's victory led to more support for the program and started more reform movements. We're going to head to Wall Street, and since we JPS snakes love gossip, feel free to eavesdrop on someone else's conversation. You may hear rumors of the business plot, which is a popular conspiracy theory at the time. It was rumored that a group of wealthy businessmen were planning to overthrow FDR because of their dislike of his heavily progressive New Deal taxes. Now, let's head to a few farms in Oklahoma and Colorado. You may notice the high winds or feel something stinging on your face. Welcome to the Dirty 30s, also known as the Dust Bowl. The severe dust storms of this time were caused by poor agricultural practices and years of drought. These storms ended up leaving many farmers in the Southern Plains region without a job. Finally, let's travel to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Now, FDR had many opponents, but none of them were as widely supported as Huey the Kingfish Long. In fact, FDR once called him the most dangerous man in America. Long promoted the Share Our Wealth program in which every family would receive $5,000 at the expense of the upper class. Many rumors of plots to kill Huey Long swirled around Louisiana until finally he was assassinated by the relative of a political enemy.
Start the last day of the trip bright and early with a 9 a.m. sharp event that will take up your whole morning by ending at 12. Arriving at the Black Canyon on the Colorado River, inhale breathtaking scenery in which the sun is beautifully reflected across the crystal blue river in the canyon. Here, the dam agency will time-lapse the dam construction of the Hoover Dam firsthand. You'll be damned. With President Hoover's imposed of public enterprises and trickle-down philosophy, in 1931, construction started under him to create a huge man-made lake for the purpose of irrigation, flood control, and electric power. However, it was eventually finished under FDR in 1936 with the original name of the Boulder Dam due to FDR's dam distaste of Hoover. After, come visit New York Hoovervilles at 2 p.m. Named after the notorious Herbert Hoover, these were essentially small shanty towns of the homeless. One of the largest ones to visit is the one located inside Central Park. People here had Hoover blankets, which were old newspapers, and they also lived under harsh conditions. Other close-by sites that we will be visiting are the Hartlettsville, which includes 80 shacks on the East River, and Camp Thomas Paine, located along the Hudson River in Riverside Park. To finally end the day at 4:45, you will witness the Memorial Day Massacre. On May 26, 1937, 22,000 Chicago steelworkers went on strike. Larger companies like U.S. Steel had made an agreement with the Committee for Industrial Organization. However, small companies like Republic Steel had not. On May 30th, violence sparked with the end result of 10 deaths and 90 injuries, including 23 police officers.
We hope that you guys enjoyed our preview to our wonderful tour of the Great Depression. If you decide to join us on this tour, you will learn to truly understand the struggles that got us to where we are today. So we're looking forward to seeing you all travel with us, and be sure to check out our vacation packages.